Hello and welcome to the Play Creators Conference. My name is Billy Langsworthy. I'm co-founder of Mojo Nation, and I'm over the moon today to be joined by JM Duparc, Chief Creation at Identity Games, to talk about all things Nightmare Horror Adventures, the firm's new spooky, creepy, tense board game, which we'll be delving into in a bit. So hello, JM.
Hi, how are you?
Not bad, mate, not bad. Delighted to have you here today. So to kick off, for anyone that maybe hasn't met you before or doesn't know too much about Identity, how did you first get into the world of board games?
Yeah, I've been in with Identity Games and in the industry for about 15 years now. And for me, it's just been a lifelong dream. I've literally never done anything else than make everything into a game. So, making a test or walking the dog or biking to school or clearing the dishwasher, everything was always a game to me. So this is, for me, this was the only way to go.
Perfect. And what, in terms of your jobs before Identity, were they playful jobs, or were they?
There was not a job before Identity. Like right away, during my student days at university, I was already making my own games and going to the Nuremberg Toy Fair and trying to talk to people in the industry, because I knew as soon as I finished my university, I want to work in this industry.
Great. And I suppose the clue is in the poster behind you. I suppose there is a big clue in terms of.
Yeah, well spotted. Absolutely.
Very, very nice. And so in terms of Identity is a really interesting company because there's definitely certain cases of the sorts of products that you guys put out, the sort of games that you're interested in are quite unique in certain cases, quite out there. So how would you describe, if there's any inventors watching that haven't presented games to you or are interested in showing you games, what for you makes a perfect Identity Games game?
Yeah, the reason we're called Identity Games is because we feel that every game should really have its own identity. So consumers, they don't have to know, they don't have to know our brand, but they do have to know our games. So when you see or hear about one of our games, it must really stand out. And we're not specialized in making games for a specific target group, but if it's a really unique game for 2-year-olds, or it's a really unique game for adults, then it's we feel it's an identity game.
Yeah, perfect. And is there a game, any sort of recent games that have come out from you guys that you feel sort of sum up exactly what you're talking about there?
Well, I think it's best to give two examples. The first being Escape Room, the game, which is our worldwide hit. And we feel that's an Identity Games game because, first of all, when you see it, right away you know what you're going to do. All right, it's an escape room, and we're going to play it at home. Fantastic. We were the first ones to come out with this idea. It's a difficult game to play, but it's really easy to understand. And it's really unique in its way that a game for mass that you can only play once, takes an hour. Those were quite a few risky things to put in a game, but we like taking risks. And I think another example is Who's the Dude, which is a game with a blow-up doll, and very different from Escape Room, but right away when you see it, charade with a blow-up doll, you know exactly what you're going to do. Risky element here being the fact that you can't put a blow-up doll into a game. So I think they're very different games, but they both have the Identity Games signature, I feel.
Yeah, and I'm interested with Who's the Dude. When that was shown to you, do you think there was an element of them showing you that, and that was Seven Towns, right? Who did
yes, that was Seven Towns.
So was that very much then thinking, well, you know what? If there's any company that's gonna be get the value of doing something quite left field, it's gonna be you guys.
The first thing they said when they showed me Who's the Dude is, you're the only company we can show this to. And right away they had me on the edge of my seat. I'm like, okay, that sounds, that's a great way to start a pitch if you're pitching to Identity Games.
Absolutely. And just on that very quickly, I mean, what for you makes a good pitch? Is there any sort of good tips that you think if someone's going to be sat down in front of you or virtual at the moment, what is the best way to sort of capture your attention in a pitch environment?
Yeah, really look at the games that we've made in the past, and try to pitch something that really fits in our collection. So if we, when we made Who's the Dude, then I got quite a few ideas of game developers that made a game with a blow-up doll or with a blow-up element. And we think, oh yeah, but we already have that. We don't make like 25 different Who's the Dude. We think with Who's the Dude, we have the best party game, so we're good in that department. Now we want to make something else really different and really cool. So it's going to be a really different, unique, and self-explanatory game.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of sort of unique and different, it leads us very nicely onto one of your latest games, Nightmare Horror Adventures. Welcome to Crafton Manor. I played it this week with my neighbours, who I don't know very well, and I'm not sure they'll ever speak to me again. To be fair, that might be the beginning of the end of our relationship, because they were well and truly freaked out at several moments. But I'm interested, going right to the sort of start of that game. How would you describe what that game is, and where did the idea come from?
Well, the idea came from that we're always looking for trends, and those can be trends within the industry, but preferably outside of the industry. Like escape room, we saw that trend when it was not yet in a game yet, and there were just a lot of escape rooms. And we saw a presentation about the movies that are now very hot. And then we saw a statistic saying that 1 out of 4 millennials watches a horror movie each week. And we thought that's an amazing a number that you can hardly believe. And we thought, okay, and then we did a little research and we found out there were quite a few horror game themed games, but not actually games that were scary to play. So we thought, okay, let's make a game for the mass, so like a really easy, a low rule game to play, like escape room. It's a difficult game to play, but there are not a lot of rules. But let's make a game that's actually scary to play.
Yeah, mission accomplished. Mission accomplished, I think.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because and I've said this before, the first game I remember playing, and it's a bit twisted, but the first game I remember properly having an effect on me when I was a kid was Atmosphere, the game.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And as a kid, I remember being absolutely terrified by it, and it being very much, my parents' game, and they play it with friends, and it would be like something that I wasn't meant, not meant to play and stuff like that. And then obviously when I was older, and there was the DVD version and stuff, and it had a real effect. But you're right, there aren't many, despite there being horror being a really big thing, there aren't many games actually designed to scare you. And I think with this game, and again, not going into any of the spoilers or the twists and the turns, because there's lots of very very cool surprises in the game. But it's a very intricate. I imagine from a design point of view, there must have been quite a few headaches. And how do we do that? What was the development like of that game?
Yeah, it was. It was crazy actually. We were brainstorming like literally for months, and then we had 6 ideas, and then we had 0 ideas, and then we had like so many elements that we wanted to put in a game, and then we would say, all right, okay, let's do a brainstorm and let's make it smaller, and then after 2 hours it had only gotten bigger, and then we had like a whole day with really a deadline, and said, at the end of the day, it's got to be clear how this game is going to work. And the whole team was there, and it was blood, sweat, and tears. And at the end of the day, and I think like 15 minutes before the day ended, we had this like eureka moment where just all the the puzzle pieces fell into place, and oh, but then that, and like everybody was on fire, and 15 minutes later, the whole game concept was clear, and then the developing could finally start, which took months and months as well.
Yeah, and how, I'm interested, how do you gauge? Because it like it does have very creepy moments, and it builds to a really, an ending which I don't think I've ever seen in a board game, and it's again, without talking about exactly what that is, it's the sort of thing that on paper you'd think a board game would struggle to do. You'd sort of think, how can we get that kind of moment in a board game? And I think you've managed to do it. But in terms of it being a game that is out there to creep people out and to actually have that genuinely feel a bit on edge and scared, rather than just we're playing a horror game and we're very much in our own, there's a board, we're in our living room, the lights are on, we're playing a game that's set in a horror world, rather than genuinely feeling fear. How did you guys go about testing, what scares people? Are you all big horror fans anyway? Do you watch a lot of movies like that? How do you
Yeah, we watched quite a few movies in the preparation, but what we also did is we worked together with an actual screenwriter. So we had actually written for movies and written for TV shows, because it really had to feel like that you were in an actual story. And we had all these different scary elements. And we just tested it on people. And we tested it on colleagues that were not expecting to be guinea pigs. And we tested it in play sessions at different moments. And some things we thought those are going to be really scary, and they did not work. And other things just like very subtle, and people would just like literally get goosebumps. And we had people screaming literally during the play testing. And it sounds a bit weird maybe, but the first time you hear someone scream during your game, you're like, oh man, we're really on something here.
Absolutely, yeah. No, that's really interesting. And in terms of giving it a bit of context, especially, like you're saying, you work with a screenwriter. For anyone that hasn't heard of the game or seen it, what is the story? Who are you playing as, and what, without going into spoilers, what is the context of the game?
Yeah, it's a cooperative board game, and the story is that you all grew up, your family, so your brothers, sisters, and cousins, and you all grew up in a mansion. With all your parents in this like community, and then one fateful night, there were 8 parents. One fateful night, there was a little shed that caught fire with 7 parents inside, and you find, the bodies were found by the police, and there's 1 parent missing. And one of the people in the game has done a lot of research and has all these new clues on who the missing parent is, because of course the missing parent is the killer. So it's a game where you have to find out who the killer is with your brother, sister, and cousins.
Absolutely, and you're going room to room, finding clues. There are, I don't think it's a spoiler to say there are blindfolds involved in certain points.
No, there are definitely blindfolds involved.
So it's a proper experience, and I think that I'm interested in terms of, like you're saying, about trends and about horror and that sort of thing. Do you think it's the sort of, because again, this is the Nightmare Horror Adventures is the brand name for the game, and then Welcome to Crafton Manor is this story.
Yeah.
So is it the sort of thing where you think actually there's a life, a bit like with your escape room titles, is there a life beyond this one game? Do you think there are other scary stories?
Yeah, absolutely. No, and what we're aiming for is, we didn't really want to make a game. We wanted to make an experience, and that's what we were aiming for. And I think we've succeeded really well in creating the experience. But you're more an expert, because I've never played the game.
Have you not?
No, I'm of course not, because I.
You know it too well. Well, it's one of those things where, you get it's an interesting one, because when I played it, there was a mixture of people that I play a lot of games. We had a couple of people who just don't play games at all. So it was very, very new to them, the whole experience. But they were, they were all, and myself included, on edge. People, a lot of people jumped at certain points, and like I say, especially, I think there's an interesting thing when you're asking people to do things in a board game, even though, like you say, this is very much more of a story-driven experience. It's in no way a typical board game. But I think people have expectations. They see a box, they see that we're around a table. There's going to be a certain thing. So when these things happen, and especially, as again, we won't go into it, but the ending is very involving and very much not a board game. It becomes something a bit different. I think people are very much on edge because there's that fear of, well, I think the smart thing with this game, again, without ruining anything, is that it sets up certain expectations. We're sat here, we're playing a game. There are cards, there are this, there are that, there are the other, and you think you've got an idea of how far it can go as a game. Games do this, and that's all they do. And I think what this game does quite well is it eventually does things that board games don't normally do and can't do. You sort of think, well, how can a game do that? So I think it's I think on that front, having played it, it's great. And I've still had some messages from neighbours who are still scarred by the experience, and probably.
Well, yeah, that's a great sign, But that's also what you just asked. The challenging thing on making a second game is because all the scary elements and like the plot twists, and we can't use that for the second game. When we're making escape room expansions, that's also a difficult process, but we know what the goal of the game is going to be. You have to escape within 60 minutes by solving puzzles. And here, we're working on a few different scenarios, but probably even the whole gameplay will be different.
Yeah.
So it will be a totally new experience.
Yeah, and I'm interested as well, just in terms of how you, and again, a part of it must just be trust, but it's one of these games where any game that's very story driven, you're obviously having to put a lot of trust in the players to be able to, whether this game is very thematic. So every player gets a character, and you're very much encouraged to perform the role and to you're not just playing yourself, you're acting a role. So how do you navigate that in terms of giving players enough of a, this doesn't really have an instruction manual. It just, you go to the website, you type in your code, and off you go. So there's a lot of trust in you guys in terms of, you're not giving the players much to go on. So how did that process, in terms of working out how much to give the players and how much to trust them not to get everything right, I suppose, was that a trial and error process as well?
Oh, absolutely, but we've had a lot of experience with escape room. We've made almost 40 escape room adventures, so we know we have a pretty good feeling on what we can ask our players. And to be honest, we did a lot of testing. There was a lot of testing involved, and not only with like real board game players, but also with like your neighbors, people that don't really often play games, they just want a real cool experience. So we have people like playing with no idea, and just testing and testing and testing.
Yeah, very cool. And I'm interested in terms of, obviously, you've got to present this to buyers, and they're and distributors and other parts of the chain. What was their reaction? Because again, like you say, this is a very different style of game, and in terms of choosing, you obviously want to show them certain parts of it that are special parts. So how did that go? How did you pitch the game to people that will be taking it on?
Yeah, we gave them an experience. So what we did in Nuremberg is we made a real scary room, and we had a video, and we showed like one or two small elements in the game that were actually scary. And because we're not going to say here's the box, and this is a really scary game. We wanted to give them the experience, but it was quite difficult. And there were, companies that said, well, this is really cool, but this is way too scary for us, or we can't have a game where people are murdered, or set on fire. That's not a fit, which is, absolutely fine. We don't want to take the edge off the game. So we were looking for companies so that could really do the game justice.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm interested. When after I played it, it was one of those things where, like I say, I'm a big movie fan and I'm a big horror movie fan. And I was thinking, actually, there are so many classic scary movies that never really translate into they never really translate into board games, either because they're not they're maybe not the focus of a licensing program for whoever owns the rights and things like that. Do you think, because of what this game manages to do, and how there are certain tropes and certain things that are in horror movies that you've managed to pull into a board game that hasn't happened before, is it part of your thinking at some point that maybe the Nightmare Horror Adventures brand could actually work with licenses and brands and movies and sort of incorporate some of that, or is that not really part of the plan?
I think that would be really cool. There are some some horror movies that I really love, and I would love to have a collaboration with them. But the thing is here that, and that's, I think, a difficult thing here, is you have to have the freedom, because you can't play a scenario that was already in a movie, because then it's what you expect. So you have to have this freedom that it should be like a side story. You can't have a game with it, and then we all know the clown did it. That can't be it. So it's got to be.
Yeah.
It's difficult, but I'd love to make this into such a big brand that at one point a movie license will say, "All right, guys, here's all the freedom. Just make something really cool."
Absolutely.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Certain films that rely on a big twist. Yeah, you obviously don't want to just retread stuff that people already expect. But no, I think that's great. And I'm interested. You guys have a really good reputation with the inventor community. A lot of the inventors love to show you guys stuff. Is this, in terms of a brand and non-IP? And obviously you've said there, you don't like getting pitched, thousands of the same type of game because you've done this. But if there are inventors that either play this game or listen to this and think, well, actually, I've created a really unique thing that fits into a way of scaring gamers, and there's this. Is this one of the properties that you are open to talking to the inventor community about, in terms of if they have a story or a sort of a scary thing that they think could work for a game? Is this sort of
absolutely? That would be amazing, because and the same with Escape Room. We put our heart and soul in this game, and every scary thing we could think of, we tested and we put it all in. And now we have to make a second one, and which is a really cool challenge. But if there's an inventor, out there saying, well, I have a game that's very different from this, and it's scary to play, and I'd be over the moon.
Perfect. There we go. We've opened the floodgates to sleepless nights with scary games coming your way. And I'm interested. I think interestingly, this game as well. There's obviously, with lockdown and with people not going out and things like that. That there are, in the UK, there's theme parks. There's normally horror mazes and experiences that horror fans go to be scared. Do you think, in a sort of strange way, with a lot of that shut down and a lot of theme parks not open, and those experiences that people would normally go out to try and be scared, around, do you think actually that this might end up helping the game, in terms of it's a game that people can play at home with their family, and you bring those sort of very visceral scares and live experiences?
Yeah, I think so. We've had the same experience with Escape Room. Escape Room, the game was still growing, but escape rooms in general were still growing. And now, of course, people can't go to escape rooms anymore. And so what do? You buy an escape room that you can play in your house. So we've had that experience with Escape Room, and we think we'll have the same experience with Nightmare as well. there's less horror movies coming out. Well, as you've mentioned, this really is a good scary experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of scary experiences, if we dwell on lockdown and what's been happening all over the world this year, the reason why we're talking like this rather than face to face. I mean, how has it been for you? We've done a few of these where we've asked people, how has it changed just in terms of your creativity, the way you design games. I'm interested, has it changed the sort of things you're looking at in terms of, has it had any impact in terms of, what sort of products you're looking at putting out into the world? And the second one is, I mean, just in terms of the day-to-day, how you invent games, how you work with your colleagues, how has it been in terms of the change?
Yeah, well, in the Netherlands, we had, I love marketing. I always, when I make the games, I love looking at the commercials and I want to be a part of that. But I think the marketing here was fantastic, because our prime minister, he wasn't talking about a lockdown like in other countries, but we had they call it an intelligent lockdown, which was like, everyone was like, yeah, look at us Dutch, we're so smart. And it made us feel great about our lockdown. So we did not have a lockdown like most countries did. So there was always quite a few things. So I kept going to the office the whole lockdown, which a lot of people did. But a lot of people stayed home, which was, of course, very logical. But what I missed most was just being around people and brainstorming over Zoom. I thought, oh man, it's terrible. It's better than nothing, and I still liked it. But compared to the energy of people in a room, just talking about ideas and then taking a walk together and discussing it further. That's just much more who I am, and what I like, and also what I like about our industry. The fairs that are being cancelled. It's besides the fact that it's bad for business, and I just really miss the connection with all the people. Yeah. There's so many great people in it, in our industry. And I need to see them a couple of times a year just to, just for me. So that's, I think, and in terms of the game that we're looking for, the games that we're looking for, I don't think that has changed, but it's much harder to, show your games if there are no fairs. That's very difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's all. Hopefully it won't be too much longer. And I'm interested. Just one of the last questions. Obviously, you're putting this game out there. You're going to be scaring a lot of people. Do you scare easy? Are you a horror fan? Are we going to find out actually you're a big wimp and you don't like horror films and this is all you're a hypocrite? What do you like horror movies or?
Yeah, I absolutely really like horror movies. My wife doesn't, so it's been quite a long time since I've watched horror movies. But like in preparation of Nightmare and during Nightmare, I was watching so many horror movies. I think the funniest one is that when I flew back from Hong Kong Toy Fair, I was watching a really scary horror movie, and I had two colleagues that were in the seat behind me. And they had watched the movie on the way to Hong Kong, and so they were watching and at the scariest moments, of the movie, they grabbed my chair and they just shook it, and I was like already so tense, and I was tired, and and in a plane you're, I think, always a little bit more on edge, and I just jumped up in the plane. Quite embarrassing, but quite funny.
Nice.
And it's terrible to have such colleagues, but so do I scare easily? Yeah, I think so. I like to get involved in the games, in movies. I have a big imagination, and which is really helpful sometimes. But in horror movies, it's sometimes not the best quality to have.
And interestingly, there's a not that this should be a plug for that, but there is there's a horror movie that's just came out very recently that was filmed via Zoom. It was filmed over Zoom, called Host, and it's out on a platform called Shudder, which is like a sort of Netflix for horror movies. And it's a very, if you're interested in a very short, scary watch, and if you can cope with another Zoom call, it's a very smart way of turning that into that. So I'd recommend giving that a go. But yeah, and back to the game, in terms of if anyone's watching and really wants to give it a go and see what it's all about, where will the game be available? Have you finalized everywhere where people can get their hands on it?
No, absolutely not, because we have to make a website for the game. You know, it's like a web app game. It's which we have to translate into all these languages. So we're not launching it in a lot of countries now. So the big launch will be next year. But John Adams is doing it in the UK, and we're very excited about that. So and we're doing it in the Netherlands, and we have quite a few partners. But next year will be like the big nightmare launch in the US, in France, and in
Great.
most countries. Yeah,
that's brilliant. Well, no, I'm excited to see what the future of it looks like, because like I say, it does something, you know, genuinely different, and it does it well, and it's yeah, anyone who's interested in you know, scaring their neighbours is it's well recommended. So and I think, yeah, well done on putting it off, because like I say, from a technical point of view, it's I can't imagine how tricky that was to get the pieces in order to hit those.
It was blood, sweat, and tears, but we're really happy and proud of the result.
Yeah, rightly so. Well, amazing. Thank you, JM, so much for that, and thank you for watching. And hopefully we'll catch up in person very soon.
All right, thank you for your time. I hope so too.